Thanks, Neil. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me all right. I will just share my screen now. Okay, hopefully you can see my slides there. Yeah, my name's Dan Rusby-Gale. I'm from Foresters, and I'm going to talk to you today about how to make your IP investment ready and get the proper proper protection in place to help you secure your investments. So we're going to look at the main forms of IP. These are all items of property, and I'll be talking about patents, trademarks, registered designs, and there's some other IP forms there which I'm not going to mention today. But importantly, all of these are items of property. They can belong to you, or they could belong to your company, and you can transfer them, assign them, license them out, and so on. So let's look at some case studies. So starting off with trademarks. Now you can register your company name, your product name, any slogans, logos, graphics, that kind of thing, which basically form part of your brand. You can register all of those as trademarks, and it's important, particularly when you're selecting your company name, that you choose something that's distinctive and not descriptive of the goods or services. So this will really increase the chances of you being able to register the trademark. The good thing about trademarks is they last indefinitely, and they can be used to protect your brand forever if you like, as long as you pay your renewal fees every 10 years or so. So the next form of IP would be registered designs, and a registered design will protect the appearance of the whole or part of a product, and it's relatively quick and cheap to obtain registered design protection. Your design must simply be novel, i.e. new, and it must have individual character in the sense that it's creates a different overall impression on designs that have gone before. So it's relatively cheap and quick to obtain. You can get protection for your design for up to 25 years, as long as you pay your renewal fees every 5 years. And it's very broad, the scope of a registered design. You're just protecting the appearance of a product, sets of products, parts of products. Got part of a shoe there. Also logos, web interfaces, graphical user interfaces, typefaces, and anything like that. So moving on to patents now. A patent it's another form of IP which protects an invention which must be a technical solution to a technical problem. And over here and in most countries around the world, we operate a first to file system. So it's important that you secure an early filing date for your patent application, and that's the date from which your protection will run. It's critical that you file your patent application before you disclose your invention to others, because once your invention is out there, you can no longer obtain valid patent protection. Those disclosures that you made would then be citable against your own patent application. So yeah, get your patent application filed early. A patent is basically your deal with the government in return for you telling the world how you're doing what you're doing, how to make the invention. You can get up to 20 years of monopoly to exploit the invention. It's not a right to use the invention, it's a right to stop others from using your invention. Again, you need to renew your patent every year. So there's various hurdles you need to meet to get a patent. The invention must be novel in the sense that it's not disclosed or known anywhere already. And the invention must be inventive in the sense that it's not an obvious combination of what's gone before. And also the invention mustn't fall under one of the exclusions from patentability. So there's various exclusions, computer programs, medical treatments, that kind of thing. So yeah, we would need to craft a patent application carefully to try and maximize the chance of the invention being found to be novel, inventive, and not excluded. So the patent process runs roughly like this. We would draft an initial priority application, which would be drafting a description of the invention and some claims at the end, which define the scope of protection. And the usual route, we would file in the UK first because it's cheap, and you get search results back pretty quickly, within 4 to 5 months. And yeah, the search report will give you a good idea about whether you're likely to get a patent and what the scope of that patent might be. So that's for the UK only. Then if you want protection elsewhere, within 12 months, you can file either national applications in each country where you want protection, so Europe, US, Japan, etc. Or at the 12-month mark, you could file an international patent application. Now, an international application doesn't lead to an international patent. There's no such thing. You will need a patent in every single country where you want protection. So the international application is really a vehicle for keeping the door open to apply in almost all countries around the world at a later date. So, so you'll still have to incur the filing costs in the various countries, but they will be delayed by up to 30 months from the initial UK filing. So for startups, the international route is a good way to go, because it buys you more time to secure investment for the national phase filings, and also to so you can work out where your markets are and where you might want protection. So that's a quick run through of the patent process. Now, everybody asks about algorithms and AI. Are these patentable? And it really depends on what you're doing. So many inventions involve algorithms these days, computer software, that kind of thing. The algorithm or the AI itself is deemed to be a mathematical method, which is excluded from patentability. So, so it's not possible to patent the algorithm or the AI itself. There's no technical effect. It's just an algorithm that pulls in data and outputs data. There's nothing technical going on in the real world. But the overall system or the process which uses the algorithm or AI might well be patentable if it's producing a technical contribution in the real world that's solving a technical problem. So yeah, for example, down at the bottom there, a neural network. The neural network itself is not patentable, but using it for the purposes of identifying irregular heartbeats in a heart monitoring apparatus, that's a technical effect. So you could get a patent for that. The other example, using AI itself is not patentable, but using AI for the technical purpose of classifying images is a technical effect, and therefore the overall system may well be patentable. So here's rather an old looking iPhone. There's many forms of IP here. Apple will register the Apple and iPhone as trademarks. The technology itself in the phone, almost every aspect will be covered by patents to protect the technical solution to the technical bits of the iPhone. The appearance well, it used to be quite distinctive and will be protected by registered designs, and that will be the phone itself, the casing and the screen, and as well as the icons and the way that the icons are laid out on the screen. Apple will own the software in the computer code that makes the phone operate, and they'll hold trade secrets back, which they're choosing not to disclose, that they'll just keep in-house, and hopefully nobody will find out what those are. So you've got your business now. What do your investors want to see here? First of all, have you checked the market to see, checked your competitors to see if you're likely to be infringing somebody else's IP, patents, designs, trademarks, etc.? Have you done your due diligence? Secondly, have you protected what you're doing, and how have you protected it? So it's important to have an IP strategy in place to identify your IP, the various forms of IP that I've touched on today, and you've got a plan for working out how to protect these, particularly with patents, where you need to get the protection in place before you disclose the invention to others. And investors also might like the patent box scheme, whereby you can reduce your corporation tax from 20% down to 10% on the profits derived from a patented invention. These are worldwide profits as well, so you can have a patent in the UK, but you'll get the corporation tax relief on the worldwide profits from that invention. This is less of a feature for early stage startups who aren't paying corporation tax, but it's it's something to bear in mind further down the road as your business grows. So yeah, I'm from Foresters. How can we help you? So we offer a free 30-ish minute consultation. It's usually a bit longer, by phone, or I've been doing them by video call these days. We can look at talk about your business and identify the IP that you might have, and put together an IP strategy and a roadmap for you to file your patent and trademark and registered design applications to get the protection in place. We can also help you with the IP part of pitch documents for investors and that kind of thing. Also, I should mention ownership of the IP rights. We can help you with that, and we can help you with assignments and getting the assignments recorded so that the IP rights vest with the correct entity, usually your business. Yeah, we can do fixed price quotes and look at your competitors and work out what patents or applications they might have. Yeah, we can just tailor the advice to what you want. And yeah, a quick sales pitch. Yeah, we've got a wide-ranging team of patents and trademark attorneys, all familiar with copyright and designs as well. I'm on the software and the technology and engineering side, but we have a life sciences team and a chemistry team that handle medicines and biotech stuff. So finally, I'm just going to end with, this is a quick case study. One of our clients came to us with he developed this marking tool, which is, the way it works is it sprays out a cross of chalk dust onto the wall when you push it in, push it through a hole. So you can hold your kitchen cabinets up on the wall, push this device through the hole, and it sprays across where you need to drill your hole to mark the to put up the cabinet. And so it's a pretty simple invention. The inventor came to us. He'd been making this in his garden shed, literally, and we helped him by doing a background search to work out what else was out there in this sort of field. Off the back of that, we drafted a UK patent application, which we then filed, got it to grant, and he then went down the international patent route, which I mentioned before, and got patents in the key jurisdictions, his key markets, sort of US, Europe, and also China, where manufacturing is occurring. We registered his marksman trademark. He also went on Dragon's Den, and we did a mock Dragon's Den session in our offices to help him with that. And yeah, all 5 of the dragons offered to invest. They were really interested, and off the back of that, he's now stocked in all the UK DIY stores. So that's a success story on how getting the IP in protection in place can really help with your business. So that's what I was going to say. If you've got any questions, yeah, do drop them in the chat box and I can answer those. I'll just stop sharing my screen now. There we go. Okay, so yeah, if there's any questions, do put them in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll hand you back to Neil. And I see Isabella's there now, so she can talk about seed legals.
Dan, thanks very much. To everybody who's attending, as I say, if anybody's got any questions they'd like to ask now, then great, please do so. If not, if you can put your information or the question in the chat room and we'll get it answered for you later on as we go on through the meeting. So Dan, thanks very much. Is there anybody who wants to ask Dan a direct question now, or again, just pop it in the chat? Give you a minute. No, that's okay then. Dan, thanks very much. We've got, as I say, the chat's open. So anybody who's got any questions, please feel free to just pop them in there and we'll get around to answering them later on. That applies to myself and also from Isabella from Seed Legals as well. There's also a poll running. If you could just quickly complete that as you're going through the meeting, that would be great. Help us make things better, give you more information in the next events and such like. So thanks very much again, Dan. I'd now like to introduce you to Isabella from Seed Legals. Now, people who've been on one of these before will know exactly where we're at here and how important certain things are that I will go on about as well later on, which is SEIS and EIS Advanced Assurance. But Isabella, for now, I'll hand everything over to you.
Thanks, Neil.
Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, great. I can share my screen. Yeah, so just so everybody knows, whether they want to keep listening to me at least or go and fill up your emails, what this workshop is essentially how do you growth hack your funding round, right? Like, what are investors looking for? What are the key things people forget? Now you're probably thinking, well, that sounds quite basic, and yeah, it is, but it's the details that are the make or break between whether you raise investment and whether you don't. So to put it into context, before we even talk about actually raising, let's think very quickly about validation. And I think the most interesting story to go over is the story of Buffer. So obviously the social media scheduling platform founded by a tech guy and a business guy, super trendy at the time. They raised, or someone offered them about 100 grand for 30%. And they were like, this is great. We can spend on marketing, we can hire this person, we can do all these things and build these products. And very quickly, the tech key guy was thinking, well, does anybody actually want what we're doing? And so they did two things. Now, the first is they created a landing page. And essentially what it did was, this is what we're doing. This is what our dream is. If you think it's cool, sign up. And people did. And once they had quite a long email list, they introduced a second landing page, which is, this is what we do. This is our dream. Feel free to pay for the services here. And very quickly people did. And so what happened was they were turning revenue, quite a lot of revenue, and they never had to raise for a significant amount of time. So there's two parts to this kind of story, which is, the first is, an investor will not invest in you if you go to him and say, hey, I've got this great idea, give me 50 grand to show you it's a great idea. You don't need the full stack product to be able to show that the idea has value in the market and that people want what you're building. That's something you can do. You're in the world of WordPress and Typeform and Shopify. You can very much show that there's a demand for your product without spending thousands on building it. Now, the second part to that is, if you are a business that is turning revenue and people keep telling you, but have you raised investment? Well, my question to you is, do you need to raise investment? Are you at a stage where you don't have enough cash flow to grow and you want to streamline loads of the services you're providing? Or are you just raising for the sake of trying to validate what you're doing? Because my guess is, if you're turning revenue, people want what you're doing. So why are you raising investment? And I think that's really something you should ask yourself, because when you raise, you're giving away equity and you're giving away part of your company. And the more you do that, the harder it becomes to raise in the future. So when you do raise, think about where that money is going to go. And it allows you to attract better investors and go for a much better round. But if you're at a point where you're like, okay, no, I definitely want to raise, I'm going to use it for X, Y, Z, and I've proved my concept and all of these things, then we have to start talking about, well, how much equity do you want to give away? So based on the stats of, 3 years of being the largest closer of funding rounds in the UK and over 14,000 founders and more, we saw that on average, founders are raising maybe 2 to 3 times a year, giving away about 15%. Sorry, not 2 to 3 times a year, 1 to 2 times a year, and giving away about 15% equity. So it's the classic fundraising cycle. I'm going to raise now, and then I'm going to raise again in 12 months, and maybe after that I'll raise in another 18 months, and I'm going to raise a large sum of money, and that's going to have to be my runway for the next year. But founders that are raising and being able to raise again are giving about 15% equity away. So why do I keep saying that? What is so important about 15%? Well, a lot of questions that we get asked is, well, how much equity should I give to my investors? And there is no right answer to that, to be honest. It really depends on what sector you're in and who you're dealing with and what stage you're at. But what I can say is, don't make yourself uninvestable. So if you're giving away, for example, 30% in your first round, and you raise 100 grand, and then you give another 30% in your next round, and you may raise maybe 500 grand. You've raised under £1 million and you've given away 60% of your business. You have effectively become fairly uninvestable. And the reason for that is twofold. The first is that you don't have enough equity for any institutional or really real investors to invest in. And number two is you've diluted yourself so much as a founder that people don't want to invest in you because they think, well, you don't really have much skin in the game, do you? So if we think now going back to, okay, well, a maximum, I'm going to give away between 15 to 17% equity. If you do that 3 times, let's say 15%, you get to your third round, probably entering pre-Series A territory, and you've only given away 45% of your business. Now, there's a lot to learn from that. The first is if an investor is coming and saying, give me 60% of your business for 100 grand, he's not a smart investor, nor does he have your best intentions at hand, because it doesn't make sense for him either. You're not going to be able to raise after that. You're not going to be able to grow. Second thing is, if you do agree to that, all your other investors are thinking is, wow, you must be an amateur, and you don't want to seem like an amateur. And the third thing is this is not my opinion. This is the data. So if you're not sure, just look at what the market standard is, and you can see if you're giving away, 1% equity, okay, you're on the lower end. That's okay. If that's what you want to give, that's fine. But if you're like, oh no, I don't want to give any equity, and your investors are coming back saying this is ridiculous, you can kind of think, okay, well, the average is 15%. But in the same space, if someone's asking for so much more, like they clearly don't know there's things either. So market standard is about 15%. Now, if you're a first-time founder, how does that affect your valuation? Well, it's quite simple. Valuations are incredibly difficult to come up with. It really varies. But if you are a first-time founder and this is your first raise and you've never raised before, you don't really know how to map out financial predictions, nor can you, right? Because you've not really used any money. Why can you say, oh, if I spend 10 grand on marketing, I'm going to get X amount of customers, which will give X amount of revenue? You can't. So thinking, okay, well, what do I know? What do you know? You know that you need to pay for a website domain. You know that you may or may not need an office. You know that you do need a marketer. You know that you do need to hire an intern, and you can factor in these costs that you're like, okay, like I know why I've done this. And then you think, okay, well, I'm not going to give away more than 15%. So you need to set a valuation that basically isn't so high that you're going to go through a down round, basically that once the money comes in, you can't actually meet the valuation, and so you have to make a lower valuation for your next round, which you should never do. And you don't want it to be so low that you're giving away so much of your company. So if you think about those two numbers, let's say I want to raise 100 grand to get to the next 12 months, and then I want to give away about 15% equity, your pre-money valuation will sit at maybe 700, 800,000 pounds, maybe £1 million. And it allows you to really factor in a very simple way, saying, okay, well, this makes sense. Then where more interesting valuations will come in is when you've actually used that money, you can see what revenue comes from different spends. So that's kind of the valuation front, or maybe make it a little bit more simple for you to think about, okay, that makes a little bit more sense as to where I should be focusing. Now, what are investors looking for in these times? What are the basics that people forget, which Neil will go on with? The first is really SEIS and EIS Advanced Assurance. For anybody who doesn't know what that is, essentially in 1992, HMRC said, okay, we need to funnel more investment into startups from angels. So they created this massive tax incentive, which makes London and the UK the startup hub that it is, because you don't get it anywhere else. So use it. And what it is that you as an early stage company can take up to 150 grand worth of SEIS investment. Now, what is SEIS investment? Well, essentially, of that 150 grand that either one investor can give, or 4 investors can contribute to it, those investors get a 50% tax break on their capital gains tax, amongst other tax benefits. You can also take up to £12 million of investment from different investors, not per investor, in total £12 million, where those investors get a 30% tax break. So you can think, imagine yourself an investor, financial crisis, do I invest in real estate? Do I invest in the assets market, or do I invest in a startup? Well, think about it. If I invest in the startup and they make a loss, but I've made a 50% tax break, you end up offsetting your loss. It's quite an unrisky venture, particularly if it's quite a hot startup. And so it drives a lot of investors to invest in early stage companies. Now, how much does it drive that traffic of investors, you're wondering? Let me tell you, 90%, literally 90% of all early stage investment is funneled through SEIS and EIS funds. What does that mean? Well, it basically means if you don't have it, if you don't have this advance assurance, this form that HMRC gives you saying, yes, you are eligible to take on these funds, you're not going to raise investment. And it's really as simple as that. Foreign investors that pay taxes in the UK and have a bank account in the UK, they can be eligible for it. Foreign companies that have a subsidiary here, right, or a parent company somewhere else, they can benefit from it. So it's an incredibly strong tax incentive. You have to have it. How do you do it? Basically, you can either do it yourself or you can do it through us. The market standard approval rate is 64%. Our approval rate is 98% for getting this form that says, yes, you can give this tax break to investors, and we get you approved within 3 to 5 working days. I think the standard is maybe 6 weeks. The only thing I will say is don't pay an accountant $4 grand to do it. It's ridiculous, and they might not even get you approved. So either do it yourself and come to us for advice, or do it through us. Now, the second kind of part we need to talk about, which we've spoken about, is valuation. So valuations took a hit when lockdown happened because the assets market crashed, and so there's an inextricable link to the startup market. However, things have picked up, and I want to be honest that things are very much coming back to normal. So basically, don't let yourself get bullied. Like, yeah, sure, if your valuation goes down a little bit, that's fine. But if you're in a really hot sector like logistics or medtech or mindfulness, and investors saying, "Oh, but it's a financial crisis, you need to drop your valuation," I would just fight your corner a little bit. And then the next thing that you need to do to protect yourself as a founder and give your investor peace of mind is intellectual property assignment. So you've just had the talk from Foresters about patents. Patents are different. Patents are really where you've created something completely innovative, and you need to protect it. We don't do that. That's their expertise. They're good at it. What we do, however, is if you have a content writer, if you've paid a web agency, right, to create your website, you probably think, well, this guy's on my payroll and I've actually paid that web agency to create my website. I must own my website. You don't. Not unless stated in the documentation, you don't. And so what we see sometimes is, maybe a year later, you're going through an investment round, you've raised quite a lot of money, and you get an email from your web agency saying, hey, congrats on the round. If you want the rights to the website, give us $3 grand. And that happens. So what you need is a third document, which is an intellectual property assignment saying, yes, like we own the rights to this website. And you want to do that with content writers in your business. You want to do that with designers, because what if you fall out with these people? What if you fall out with them? What if something happens to one of them? You don't want any doubt. You want to protect yourself as a founder, but you want to protect the business. The business has to stay together, even if people start leaving. Now, that obviously leads us to the next point, which is massively understated, which is founders' agreements. 10% of founders split up. That's gone up in the last few months because obviously high stress environment, people are losing their jobs, You should obviously have a founder's agreement in place, setting out the rights and responsibilities. Even if you're a solo founder, you need to have that. But what's more important that a lot of people forget is a share vesting schedule. So what is that? Well, basically, like, let's say you and me, we're both founders, and we have a 50-50 split. And then, lockdown happens and I get tired and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I essentially am leaving the company with half the amount of shares. I'm not going to bring in any new capital. I'm not bringing in any new revenue, and I'm not bringing in any new clients. Half of the company is ghost shares. That's it. You're uninvestable. That's it. You're done, essentially. So what a share vesting schedule introduces is, yes, I get 50% of the shares up front and you get 50% of the shares up front. But if I leave before a certain amount of time, which on average is 3 years, I have to give a percentage of the shares back. Now, don't think this is just something that some people have. You have to have it in place. And if you don't, an investor will make you put it in place. The only thing is they'll probably put in a harsher vesting schedule along the lines of 4, 5, 6 years. The average is 3. So you need to go to these investors, right, and say, no, this is what, if you ask an investor what they won't put in what they want. So you need to look at what the market standard is and say, well, this is what we're going to do. Now, the last bit of this, before I move on to kind of the really special things investors are looking for, is your correct filings. So it's great to have all this documentation in place, but what if you forget to go to Companies House and just actually give me the shares? And we're about to close a round, we're super close to everything we've ever dreamed of. And then I go onto Companies House and I'm like, I don't own any of these shares. And you say, I forgot, I'm sorry. You go, you fill in the SO1 form, you allot the shares. Do you know what happens? I could have a huge tax liability, as could the company, because you're giving me shares that even though we haven't raised investment, they could have a potential value. HMRC is not stupid. They could tax those shares. So have all your filings done well before you go for that round, because it looks shabby and it's unprofessional and it could cause quite a steep tax liability. Now, kind of moving on, because I know there's a lot of information coming here, is what are investors looking for, right? So we talked about validation. Do people want what you're building? But what we haven't talked about is traction. Loads of people could be building what you're building, right? Let's look at crowd sharing transport. Uber, Bolt, they all work on the same thing, which is people want to get from A to B as cheaply and quickly as possible. But who has more traction? Who has more users? Who is growing quicker? And that's what's more important than the actual revenue. So for example, if we have company A and company B, company A is like Uber, right? Way more established, loads of revenue, but it's growing at, like, let's say this isn't true, but hypothetically 10% a month. I think you have another crowd sharing app that has way less revenue, but is growing at about 30 or 40% a month because they have better customer support, because they have a better UX face, I don't know. Your investor will be investing in company B because growth, particularly in a time of crisis, is more important than the revenue, because your growth and obviously the conversion of your customers, you know, who cares about the revenue, and how quickly you've attained that growth is incredibly important. But traction obviously depends on what business you're in. You know, if you're B2B, like what partners do you have? Do you have both sides of the marketplace, etc.? Whereas if you're B2C, it's really about your end users, and are you focusing on the right end users? So you really need to focus on that growth. If your revenue is small, it doesn't matter, but what does your growth look like? And then kind of on that, you need to be best in class. So what does that mean? Well, basically, yeah, there are a lot of companies that do the same things, but the ones that investors will invest in, it's not enough anymore to just have a good idea. You need to be implementing that idea better than anyone else. So how do you show you're best in class? Well, it really comes down to the basics, right? Which is like, when lockdown hit, what did you do? Did you immediately look at your finances and say, okay, we need to cut our burn rate, we need to extend our runway, we need to renegotiate our office lease, we need to put these people on furlough because they're not really going to be useful, but we do need to hire other people that will be useful and give them options because we can't afford to? Did you do that? Or did you sit back and go, oh my God, it's so hard being a founder, like I can't catch a break? Your investor wants to see that immediately, whether you're in a time of crisis or a time of normal growth, you have done the logical things, which is cut your burn rate. So how much are you spending per month, and you're extending your runway, regardless of whether you're doing well. Because all they're thinking is, can you deal with this kind of pressure? See, do you see how that problem was nothing to do with the actual business? It was to do with the logistics around it. It's similar. Are you a product market fit? You're probably thinking, well, obviously I'm a product market. No, not are you a product market fit in February when things are normal. Are you a product market fit now? Are you catering to what people need now? So you're probably thinking, well, you know, I'm in, you know, travel tech. Like, how could I cater to something now? Like, nobody's traveling. Or it's not about that. I've been leading so many founder interviews, and essentially what lockdown for the successful ones allowed them to do is they did something they never thought they'd do before. And I'm going to take Seed Legals as an example. guys, we focus on funding rounds. That's our bread and butter. Obviously, you know, not that many, but a few less rounds closed in lockdown. So what did we do? We thought, okay, well, product map has to change completely. What is the government up to? The government was releasing stuff like the future fund and furlough. So we thought, okay, there's legal stuff here. And what are we good at? Well, we're good at legals and we're good at automation. What did we do? We automated the legals. We got more click-throughs to our website than we've ever had before. And that's a non-core product. Can you believe that? So it's really about thinking, okay, like this might not be our bread and butter, but how can we use our services and target it to the current market? Because the market will be completely changing. So I'm not saying you should pivot, because pivoting is expensive. I'm saying, kind of, are you trying to ride the wave or are you taking advantage of it? And an investor will want to see that. That's how you become best in class. Just note that none of this is about the actual business. It's about your general knowledge of what's going on. Then the last part of that, of course, which is really classical, and I'm assuming you guys will know, which is, you know, do you have a team that can execute? So it used to be that solo founders were not prioritized because like they don't have anybody holding them accountable, blah, blah, blah. Lockdown hit, they were suddenly more like prioritized because they can just sit in their room and do what they need to do. So if you have a team, like, are you showing investors that yes, we've set up these communication routes and we've got these ways to check things, and you know, this is how we've grown even in a time of crisis, and these are the people who have expertise on, you know, marketing, you know, through social media, so we don't have to do, you know, in-person marketing, blah, 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 blah. You need to show these things, okay? There's so much more. I could go on forever, but just really think about, it's not about, you know, creating the, of course it's about the technology, and but really just taking the basics and thinking, okay, like, are we doing this right? So then you're probably thinking, okay, well, this isn't important, but like, who are the investors we're looking for, right? Who's on the market? And funnily enough, you know, when lockdown hit, like that really week of crisis, 75% of rounds went through with no problem. So most, right, 3/4. So it wasn't a huge, you know, a lot of investors that committed, even in travel tech companies and fintech companies, they still invested. They thought, you know what, you're a class company, you'll be fine. But has the market changed a little bit? Yeah, sure. So obviously sexy sectors are mindfulness and logistics and kind of that space. Now, not so sexy is fintech and retail and whatever, but investors are still investing. Particularly, I want to talk about the VC scene. I know that's probably a little bit later stage for some of you, but it's important that you know. So you have two types of VCs. The first is kind of an untraditional one backed by family offices. They kind of have evergreen funds. They don't really have a time frame on which they need to invest. The money's just there, you know, they invest when and where they need to. They've taken a bit of a wait and see approach. So either they've been like, no, we need to divert funds to our current portfolio, or we're just going to wait it out. Now, who have not taken that approach are more traditional VCs. So VCs that operate on a 7-year basis, the money is there only for those 7 years. They need to invest and see returns. They don't have the time to take 6 months off to, they don't have the time to take 6 months off to not invest. And so they're sitting on loads of money. So for anybody that's in here that has maybe 500K plus to raise, those are the people you should be looking at. Because they are willing to invest. And then you obviously have the angels. So how do you find angels? Well, angels all know each other. And once you're in, you're in. How do you get in? Cold emails don't really work. However, something that does work is your LinkedIn profile. And I know everybody says this, but I'm going to give you a case study. If you take, you know, let's say you have 3,000 LinkedIn followers, you probably all have more. And 1% of them come back to you. That's like quite a few more people that knew about your product and might want to invest in your product than before. So what do? Well, let's take a random company, vegan burgers. Okay. Vego burgers, you know, looking to change the way people eat vegetarian food. Magic words are raising SEIS and EIS investment, or have 150K to raise, get in contact. So don't send one of those super long things. It doesn't work. Now, the thing is about angel investors is often it's the people you know, but you didn't know, you know. Do you know how many founders I've spoken to that they met their investors playing in their water polo club, or on a sailing trip, or going skiing, or at a pub? It's really quite random. So don't underestimate that kind of non-targeted approach. And what you're going to get from that is either people who are looking for advice, people who are looking to tell you about your competitors, or people who might invest. Another method before I kind of go to the end of this is warm intros. Founder intros that have had investment, saying, hey, like, this is my investor, you know, I think there might be some interest here. Those are really high conversion rates. So if you know friends that have raised and you've been a good friend and you're not just contacting them out of the blue, use those networks. It's incredibly strong. And then the last piece of advice is the investment sector is incredibly sector specific now. So, you know, people are investing vertically in med tech or in insurtech or in property tech, blah, blah, blah. You need to insert yourself within those groups because those are the investors you want because they have the expertise in your sector. Now, the last thing I will say before we talk very, very, very briefly on how investment has changed is ask for advice before you ask for investment, because that is how you lead to the right conversations to raise. Now, when before I said that on average founders are raising 1 to 2 times a year, giving away 15% equity, that was traditional. That's the boom and bust cycle. Is that true now? It's not. It just isn't. Do you know why? It's not because there's no investment. It's because it's harder to meet investors. Look how hard it is to meet somebody over Zoom. So what, founders are just not going to raise for the next 12 months? No. What has happened, which you need to know about, because this is the new way funding is working, is agile investment. You have the ability now to raise ahead of your round, go for a round, and top it up later. So what do I mean? Well, there's this thing called a seed fast, which is like a convertible loan note, but it's better because it's SEIS and EIS compliant. So what does it do? Well, let's say I meet you, you're an investor, we're at a call like this, you say, I love what you're doing, but I haven't met loads of other investors, and I say, I'm really sorry, we're only raising in October, like, can you wait? And then October comes and I've lost contact with you, whatever. Now you can say, yeah, absolutely, sign on. And what a seed fast allows you to do is he gives you the investment, or you give me the investment, I give you the equity, and you get a discount on the shares, but the valuation is not set. There's no value to the shares. That only gets set when we go through the funding round in October. What that allows me to do is raise with you, raise with another guy I meet, raise with somebody else, maybe get 60 grand together, develop the product, spend a bit of money, see what the effect is. And then in October, with you guys on my list, get better investors, have much more straightforward financial predictions because we always spent some money, and go through a higher quality funding round. That is what investment looks like. Don't think, oh, why would an investor agree to that? Most investors are. That's how investment is going nowadays. Now, the second part to that is, let's say I wanted to raise 250K for that round, right? But I only have 200 in the bank because somebody pulled out. What you can do is you can close your round. Like, investors are probably saying, look, we don't care, we need to close this round. You can close your round and top it up later. And the clause that you need to know about is an instant investment. And it was only pioneered about 1.5 years or so ago. What it allows you to do is, I'm going to close my funding round. Legally it's closed, we've done that round, and I can top it up later for a certain amount of time into a certain amount. And what we see is people raise ahead of their round, here 20 here, 30 there. They go through a very high class funding round, and then they top it up later. Because let's say I close my round, I meet you a month later, you love what we're doing, you're like, can I sign on? Typically, I have to say, no, I'm sorry, we closed our round. Now I can say, yeah, absolutely. You sign on the exact same deal terms at the same share price or a higher share price because the deal has already been closed. Agile funding has meant that founders are now raising 4 times as much as they used to and giving away half the amount of equity per round. It basically means that you don't need to sit there thinking, is this money going to last me for 12 months? You can say, I can top up my round and raise again if I need to. If you have any questions on that, please do come my way. It really is the way that people are investing nowadays. Don't underestimate it. It's so useful. And if that's it, I'm happy to answer some questions. So yeah, thank you very much, Neil. I'm just going to end sharing my screen. Stop share. There we go.
Isabella, thanks very much. Great as always. Now, is there anybody who's got any questions for Isabella whilst we're going through this? If you want to just shout out or put anything in the chat, then we can answer them now.
Yeah, so for anybody who has questions, I'm going to put my email here. Do you get in touch if anything does come to mind, or you weren't understanding something that I said? So yeah, and happy fundraising. You're in the right place.
Again, it's something that Isabella mentioned, and as far as getting investment ready, which I can cover, but I notice at the moment that 80% of the people who've completed the poll at the moment haven't got any form of SEIS or EIS, and that 73% of the people who are completed the poll are actually currently raising. So I can't stress enough how vital SEIS, EIS, advanced assurance is to companies looking at raising. It's oh, here we go. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I think just to build on what Neil said, like truly, if you don't have your advanced assurance, you are massively shooting yourself in the foot, and that's not a sales pitch from either of us, because we don't, you know, it's just what the market is. So please, like, do get it as quickly as possible. And then in terms of James down, so he said, well, you said that some people were able to give away less than 15% using agile investment. How much is it now? Well, basically per funding round, so where it all comes together, we're seeing people give away 7.5%, so half. The reason that it's less is because they raise ahead of their round and give a bit of equity away, and then they top it up later and give a bit more equity away. So whether that comes to 15%, it comes to maybe a little bit less, because you become smarter in who you give investment to, if that makes sense, because you have a wider selection of investors, because you have the ability to really talk to a lot of people and say yes or no, or you come onto the deal. But in the funding round itself, people are giving away about 7.5%, but that's not the total amount of equity they've given. That's what they've given in the round. Where they raise before that and after that, they do give a little bit more of like 1%, 2% here and there. So it really gives you that flexibility of not having to just give away everything at once. And then you're welcome, James. And then Rav has said, Rav is we worked with Seed Legals in our SEIS and EIS, and it took HMRC only 3 days to process and approve. Would have taken us weeks and months. So I think, like, for anybody who's really, if you have an investor who's said, yeah, sure, I love what you're doing, if he asks about your advanced assurance and you say, no, we've applied, but we haven't got it, and then he asks again maybe 3 weeks from now and you say, oh, no, we haven't got it, you could lose that investor, unfortunately, because it is a time game. So if you have one, just, I would say, come our way, because we can really much guarantee you'll get it within a week, just because of the relationship we have. So be careful with that. And I think Neil can back me up on there, that it is a pet peeve to constantly be chasing after founders for bits of admin that they should have in place. And how long does the process take? Well, it takes about half an hour to fill in so all you need to do, literally all you need to do, is fill in a form. And then we produce, the documentation, the cover letter, but you do need to have your pitch deck ready. So about 12, 15 slides, your financial predictions for the next 3 years, and all bits of admin, and that's kind of on you. But once you've put those in and sent it to us, we review it. Basically, we review it and get you approved and sent off within 3 to 5 business days. So kind of maximum a week to 2 weeks. Yeah.
A question from me, because I think it's important for people also to understand. We talk about valuations of companies when you're raising for a round, and obviously things have changed around, and we're now looking more at the seed fast concept, which is, as you very well explained. Could you just mention, Isabella, that obviously that in a way takes away the need for a valuation at the moment?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's quite a hard thing to get your head around, because it's so like, why would an investor sign on without a valuation? Basically, like, there's a lot of things that go into it, but this investor likes what you're doing, right? And for him, he's like, I get a 50% tax break on the investment anyway. So best case scenario is these guys take my money, build a good product, get more investors, go through a good funding round. I get a discount on the shares, company does well, boom, exit, done. The worst case scenario is I've given the money, they don't manage to go through a funding round, they don't get investors, and then effectively what happens is he still gets the tax break on his shares, and instead of that money converting into shares in the company, it converts at a low valuation. So your shares convert at a valuation that me and you have agreed, if case everything goes south, where you can kind of pull out your shares. So the reason that investors are not so stressed about that valuation is because they know, if they know the game, that by giving you this kind of cash flow ahead of time, you can build something better and go through a better funding round by attracting better investors, having more traction and more revenue, and being able to afford a higher valuation. So everybody who's like, well, how do I do a valuation? It's a time of recession. You don't necessarily need to. You just need to get those investors and really build the product with the finances you've got. The third part is because you've been given money and you've used it, right? You can see what you've used and what's worked and what you've used and what's not worked. So you've kind of tested everything. So when you go to do your, financial predictions and the financial modeling, you can say, well, this is what we tested. This is what worked. This is why I think you should give us money and we'll spend it on X, Y, Z. Neil, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Isabel. I just coming back on that, and one, whether you're raising for a round now or using seed fast and such like. I think the point you mentioned earlier about the angel investors, people you didn't know you knew, and such like, is so true, because one of the things we find, and guys who know me and girls who know me on the meeting now, we hold regular pitch events and such like, and we have a investment platform with angel investors on it. They are very much a group that reacts together. I.e., if I'm investing in ABC company, I'll tell my mate will look at it, his mate will look at it and such like. And before you know it, as far as helping you raise money for your company, you'll have a group of people who will be helping you out. We had one, and I won't mention the company, but last year, who's very successful raising capital, came to one of our events on the Tuesday, whenever it was. On the Wednesday, I had a meeting with a client of mine who hadn't been to the event, at one of the clubs in London, and we were sitting on the balcony. It was a lovely day, having a glass of wine. And so I walked around the corner, there's this guy who had been to the event, who knew, obviously, this other chap, and was sitting with the founder who presented the night before. And basically, cut a long story short, he became one of the founding partners of that company. So it's people, it's linking people, it's once you're getting your name out there is vital. And but you've got to be in a position when you do that to actually do something. I had a conversation yesterday with somebody. I said, fine, send me subscription details, send me this, send me that, I haven't got that yet. We'll discuss that when we've got an investor on board. Well, no, you won't, because what's going to happen, folks, is, as Bella also mentioned earlier, that investor might well the following day invest in something completely different, and his investment's been used up. He might think to himself, why are you coming to the marketplace when you're not ready to take money? And so my advice to anybody who's coming to one of our pitch events is have SEIS. And I'm going to, rather than preach and go through presentations, and I'm going to keep this relatively short. I'll attach a copy of our presentation. But you've got to be ready to be investable before you go to the market. And that covers everything from your validation, which is the main reason that businesses fail. I think it's 42% on a survey. It's due to not validation, your product, nobody wants it. Something you're trying to build something that nobody wants. The second is they run out of money, and obviously we're here to help that as far as it goes with pitch events and raising money. So the key is to get all your eggs in one basket, or your ducks in a line, whatever the case is, before you go to the marketplace. And vital one is SEIS. You're more or less wasting your time trying to raise money without it. We won't entertain you on our platform, because it's just a waste of our time. And I'm not trying to be hard here or anything else, but that's just a fact. And now there's a couple of questions coming in here for you, Isabella, if you want to.
Yeah, that's fine. So just quickly, so the reason that when you, and this is in response to Alex's question, why should you submit your pitch deck to HMRC? Well, the reason is because HMRC brought in this tax incentive to afford it to businesses that are risky, so per se, right? So investors are risking their money, hence why we can give them a tax break. Now, the reason they look at your pitch deck and your financial predictions is because if you're saying, I'm going to exit in 3 years, they're like, well, you're not very risky, whether that's true or not. So it's kind of a weird thing, because it's like, well, you want to show your investors you're like super on it and can do super well super quickly. You want to show HMRC that you're a risky venture. It's okay, because like neither see both decks, if that makes sense. You just have to, and this is where we come in. We help you alter your deck to make it like HMRC friendly. It's really about the way you write things as opposed to what, you know, your business actually is. So that's why. So it's not to worry, like they're not going to steal your IP or your business model or anything like that. It's just an overview of the company that they require to be able to grant you advanced assurance. And I think that's kind of all the questions I can see. Other than that, like if any, oh, right, there's one more question. You mentioned that investors want to have an SEIS and EIS advanced assurance, but one of the requirements is that you need to have a soft commit. Okay, right, very quickly. This is so important. In the HMRC advanced assurance process, they say write down the name of a prospective investor that is contributing 30% of the SEIS funds, right? That is not a thing. That was a loophole that was introduced basically to shorten the amount of applications that were going through. So like only like the real investment businesses are gonna go through. A prospective investor, right, is different to a committed investor. So you're probably thinking, well, if I need advanced assurance to get an investor and I need an investor to get advanced assurance, I can't get it. It's not true. You needed somebody who's not your brother or your mother or your business partner who, you know, has some money, as long as they're not like made up, that is prospectively going to invest in the business. They don't actually have to be an investor once you go through your funding round. So once again, with that, we do help you out, kind of going through you who we think could be suitable. Does HMRC ever call those people or check? No. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's just one of those legal things that they put in that doesn't, it's not the make or break of your application. Right, I think that's everything. If anybody's have any more questions, just feel free to email me. I'll put it once again. Just drop me a line and yeah, and then I'll let Neil kind of get on with the rest of this afternoon.
Okay, thanks, Isabella. Any other questions that anybody's got, please put it in the chat. As I say, we're recording this session as also the chat session, so you'll be able to reference that back later. The recording and the copy of the chat session will be sent out to you all tomorrow morning, so you've got that. Right, once you, let's sort of go back. Once you're in a position to raise, how do you actually meet investors? Now, although we're called Exponential Events, my background's private equity. My business partner is unfortunately not on the call today because it's his birthday. He's celebrating his 40th. He's resident in Dubai. He runs a private equity fund as well. So we are investors as well as everything else. So we've got the two sides of the coin, really. We've got the events where we can put people in touch with potential founders and investors. And we've also got our own investment side. So what we look at, we know what we look at, we know what other angel investors look at when they're potentially investing in companies. And so we've got a unique insight from both sides of the fence there. Once you're ready to raise, obviously, how do you meet people? That's the question. We advise all our startups to have, as Isabella touched on briefly earlier, an initial 1-2 sentence, a hook sentence that you can send out to your, in an email, or sorry, in a message to say, for example, your LinkedIn and also your friends and families and business partners, social media accounts. That incites interest. Doesn't even need to mention the name, just saying, we are doing this against, SEIS advanced assurance, raising X amount of money, and see what happens. Then you have a little one-page teaser that'll say a little bit more about everything that you've answer a little more questions when people come back to you and go, oh, okay, what's all this about? So that will probably say a little bit about company organisation, what you're actually doing, what you're raising again, that can be sent out. Then we've got the pitching events. Now, pitching events need to be, ours is 3 minutes to 5 minutes max as a pitch. We don't believe there needs to be any longer. It's a very short pitch deck concept, 6 slides or so maybe, what you're doing, why you're doing it, what your problems you're solving, your solutions, how you're doing it or how you're going to do it, who you are. Now, this is the important part, what you're asking for in the way of investment, but also what you're offering. So often, I see pitch decks that are 30, 40 pages long, which don't really explain what you're doing. And at the end of the day, don't actually say, oh, we're raising £100,000 for percentage equity of the company. So to me, a short deck needs to be exactly that. Too much information we don't need. You're just trying to pitch to some people, either in a room or when you're sending out to potential investors, as a sales deck. Yeah, it's not a pitch deck, it's a sales deck. You want to get some information, you want to get them back asking questions. Then obviously when you're raising, you're going to have your business plan, it's going to cover your full 5 years, whatever it might be, plan. That can be turned into a long deck. What I mean by a long deck could be a 30, 40 pages information document for investors, which will really reflect the key points out of the business plan and just make it look nice. And again, along the lines, you're going to need your financials in place and such like. So that's what I'd say as far as your pitch decks and such like need to be. And I see 5 to 10 a day. I mean, it's of them. You know, we're here to help sort of founders and such like. We will, to a certain extent, you know, advise you on how to write a, you know, 5-page pitch deck, 6-page pitch deck. Now, obviously, you've got to get out in front of as many angels, or investors, and such like as possible. If you're raising less than 500 grand, the VCs aren't going to be interested in you, so forget wasting your time. SEIS, EIS funds are always looking to invest in new startups in the UK. They are well worth approaching. You just Google them. If you just Google SEIS, EIS funds UK, you'll get a list of these funds that will be looking at investments and are investing regularly. They might well come in and take a large percentage of your of the offering straight away. Your LinkedIn profiles, as I say, social media and such like. Events, we're doing 2 pitch decks or pitch events a month now. Since 2017, we've been doing pitch decks physically in the City of London. Obviously, we can't do that at the moment. But last year alone, we had over 2,000 angel investors come to our events in the city. So what we've done at the same time now is we set up an investment platform, which ironically we set up in February before all this happened. So we were slightly ahead of the game, although we had no idea what was going on, whereby very simply what it does is a closed-end platform. It puts founders that we take onto the platform with their companies in touch with our angel investment network, which is growing all the time. We will normally charge some form of success fee on the capital raise for that company. Anybody interested in talking to me more about that, then please just drop me an email. I'll put my email address here. But that's also, I should just point out there, that's only on successful introduction of capital. We don't charge you any other fees. So, Alexi, sorry, I'll come back to that questions in a minute. Where was I? Utilise pitch events. There's a number of companies out there like us doing virtual pitch events. My advice to you is get on as many of them as possible. Yeah, I know a couple of people on here, I won't mention any names, who have been on some other events that I've held for other companies or been part of for other companies. So we're working with other event companies, with our companies, advising them to go on to different events, different networks and such like, because not every network's the same, obviously. And that works. We advise people obviously to attend our Practice Their Pitch events, where we can go over the idea of what they should and shouldn't have in it, what changes they can make. We have some investors also just come along and have a look at those because they're looking for early stage opportunities. And one we held last week, I know in fact that at least 2 people have been introduced to one of the companies from that, and that wasn't a pitch event. That was just a sort of a practice your pitch event. So we encourage you to do that. It's free. You know, you have to, if you're raising capital at these times, and I think for the foreseeable future, virtual world is great. It's going to help you a lot. It means that you can access investors globally rather than just locally, especially with platforms and such like. And also our pitch events now, we get people from Hong Kong, Singapore, places like that, attend our events, which they obviously couldn't do in London, in the city in February. So the marketplace has opened up. People, as Isabella will tell you, with the data, are investing. You've just got to get yourself into a position where you're investable. I.e., if you pitch to me and I say, yeah, love it, where do I send the money? And where's the pitch? Where's the subscription agreement? You don't go, oh, I haven't got that yet. I thought I'd see if I could get some money before I spent some. And that I'll leave you with is that on your capital raising journey, you're going to need in your budget a figure to actually allow you to raise capital, because you're going to have to spend money to raise money. Yeah, it's not a free journey. So I would advise you in your business plans and such like to put in a budget, however small it is, to allow you to attend an event, to do this, to do something else, because these things cost money. Yeah, and you need to factor that in. It could be I call you up, you do a pitch event, somebody contacts me and says, Neil, I love the pitch event from Fred Smith's yesterday. I've had to fly to Scotland. This is in normal times rather than now. Can he come to Scotland tomorrow morning? Well, you know, would you go? Could you go? Have you got enough money to either drive up there or fly up there? So these are questions you've got to look at. Now, that's enough from me. What I'll do is I'll email you a little presentation over that's got all my details on and everything else. I'll put that in the chat in a second. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask me direct before I go on to this chat thing? Feel free to have a chat.
Do you have access to investors?
Yeah, that's exactly what we do through our events and our platform.
Oh, excellent. It's just I've come in halfway, so I didn't realise.
Oh, sorry, okay. Yeah, just to recap, we hold regular pitch events. Obviously, they're virtual now, whereby people come along and pitch, and we have a network of angel investors, UK angels, high net worth individuals and such like, who come along and will listen, ask questions and such like. Yeah.
And you'd put us in a good shape before we go in front of them. You'd actually polish us up. Yeah,
what we do, you know, we're not, other than the fact if you're not investable, we'll help you as much as we can. Let me just put this in there. This is from the last thing. This has got some information and details on this file. Yeah, what we do is encourage you to email your pitch deck over. We'll have a look at that to start with. Then we do how we help you. We do regular practice your pitch workshops.
Yeah.
Sort of limit to 10, 11, maybe 12 companies, because we only want 3-4 minutes. But we've opened that up now, more of a chat panel and comments from various people, which is quite interesting. Yeah. So we've got a few investors on that, and marketing people and such like, who'll give you some ideas of perhaps you shouldn't say that there, you could put this here and that sort of thing. Then, you know, you can come and practice again. It's not a problem at all. What we'll then do is book you in for an actual, virtual pitch event, whereby, you know, we have 50, 60 potential investors on the Zoom meeting. We follow it up from there. Plus, we've got the investment platform where we can put you on there and link it into potential investors.
Okay.
Okay.
And do you have a template for your 3-minute pitch, an ideal template, 6 slides or whatever slides?
Yeah, the workshop event presentation thing I put up on there, it's got a thing about your pitch deck, like your one page or your short deck. And it's really then a question of, like, as I say, what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, who you are, what you're asking, and what you're offering. Yeah.
Okay.
It should just literally, what I'd advise people, and obviously my background is, I say, sales and private equity and such like. If you're not a salesman, and most founders aren't, get somebody you know who's a salesman to have a look at it, because they can help you. You know, free advice is great, but if you've written something that nobody understands, this isn't, you're not, with a pitch deck, you're not trying to explain too much about what you're doing. What you're trying to do is you're trying to generate some interest to people you send it to.
Yeah.
And the biggest mistake everybody makes, 99% of people make, is that they try to explain everything. Yeah. It's not.
Right.
Yeah, it's not the way to go. Not to start with. Yeah, it's killer points. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is how we're doing it. This is what we are. Blah, 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 yeah. Not that especially on the short ones, the worldwide market's worth 3 trillion, and if we get 1% of it, it's to an investor, that's bullshit, right? It's just absolute rubbish. As soon as you see that in a pitch deck, as an investor, you just switch off, because they know, and they're sensible enough, that you're not going to get that 1% of the market. Yeah.
That's what the academics kind of preach.
What? So,
the Samsung model.
To say again?
What's your total market size? That's what the academic preach. It's they tell you about to preach when you do your pitch deck. Do a total market, a local market, and a available market.
I think the answer to that's in this statement. The academics, yeah.
No, that's what I said.
It's like, at the moment, the great word out there, science and scientists. Yeah, I mean, it's not.
Unfortunately, they get funded by EU, and they have to do a bit of the academia as well. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, I as an investor don't want to know that the market's worth 3 trillion and you're going to get 1% of it, because you're not. Yeah, I want to see some financials that are sensible. Not necessarily a hockey stick. Everything's got a hockey stick in it. Something different. Personalities go a long way. I'd advise people who are pitching, and this is nothing against founders or anybody else, but you should be able, at a pitch event, if you're not a great speaker, or you're worried about standing up or being up in front of people on a video these days, is to ask somebody else to do it for you, who can do it. Now, they don't have to be involved in the company or anything else, but as the concept is just to deliver a short sales pitch, without understanding the ins and outs of the company, and this is key, right, to attracting initial investment. It doesn't matter who pitches it, providing they're good. Because you can come on afterwards and answer all the technical questions and such like. So my simple advice, obviously, to get investment ready and get your legals in place, is just keep the pitch deck simple. When an investment bank's putting together an investment deal for a company that's selling or going into some mergers and acquisitions, their one page will say, basically, we've got a company that does this, that's going to do that. Yeah, we're looking for this for it. They won't even mention the name of the company. That's something that comes later on. So this one sentence, 2 sentence teaser to send out to your LinkedIn and your friends' LinkedIn and your friends' social networks. And we're just about to start doing it for some companies that we've invested in ourselves, who've come to us and we've liked them. And as I say, we've got a private equity fund that we're investing into them. And we're going to start using our own LinkedIn contacts, which also include our investment contacts on our platform, to promote these companies out there. So, for example, I think I've got, 11,500, 12,000 people on my LinkedIn. Probably 80% of them in some form of investment or offshore financial services market. So, And then again, my business partner's got about another 9. So by the time you go around a few people, you can be sending out messages to 40, 50,000 people from different networks. Yeah. So that's another little bit of advice on how to start and how to raise. Yeah. Let's have a look. My mistake now. Anything? Isabella's answered that. Yeah, James, just come back to some VCs will look at something smaller, but most won't go anything under 500. My strongest advice to you with VCs is, unless you are raising a significant amount of money, don't waste your time with them. 9 out of 10 people I know speak to VCs waste their time. Or at the end of it, the VC says, okay, fine, yes, we'll invest, but we'll give you, 500 grand for 90% of your business. So just take it off you. There's no future at early stage really to hit the VCs. The VCs normally come in later on. I hope that answers that. Oh, a new message. Okay, thanks, James. Anybody else got any more questions? Because we're going to run out of time soon. Our next pitch event, if anybody who's interested, as I say, my advice to people who are raising or looking at raising is to get out and as much people as possible, is on the 29th of June, next week, 6 o'clock in the evening. We're running that again on Zoom. The fee to pitch is £100. It's a nominal fee. So if you're interested in that, again, please email me and we'll get you underway. In the workshop events presentation I've sent you is all my contact details, all my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. And as I say, I look forward to helping you on your capital raising journey. Thanks to Isabella, again from Seed Legals today. Any questions you've got for her, please email her. I can't stress how invaluable they are. We use them for all our companies. We won't invest in a company that's either hasn't got everything in place, and we'll push all the ones we're investing into in that direction. And to Dan from Foresters, again, thanks very much indeed. Vital information on IP, trademarks and such like. So I'm going to cut off now. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of the day. If you're in the UK, it's looking very nice, so I'll probably pop out into the garden. Rav, I'll get hold of you soon. And again, thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy your day.